Good evening. This is going to be lecture 8 in the series. It's not divorced from Zelkon, but it's important in the production of this process. I needed some help, and I got that help from a very unusual place that I will describe in this lecture. I got up and I went to the mountain like any normal morning. When I arrived there, there wasn't anything unusual about the day. It was a pretty morning. The sun was shining. It was cloudy. It had been raining, but it was pretty much a normal day, and I went about my business climbing the rocks and coming to a cave that I usually go to. And I was sitting there, but I also noticed that Charon wasn't present. And that was curious. But I didn't think too much about it. I just went about my business of getting my lotus position and meditating and expecting very little to happen, actually. Then suddenly, the atmosphere changed. It got kind of dark, and so I decided to build a small fire in the cave, which was probably not smart, but other people have done it. There's ash burnings on the wall. I mean, people have been building fires up there for years. So I built a small fire, and I was meditating, and then all of a sudden, at the entrance of the cave, there was a shadow of a very large, some sort of animal, and I didn't know what it was. I mean, we do have bears here, but you don't see them very often. We also have mountain lions and, you name it. And so I was a little frightened by what the shadow might represent. But I decided to take a walk outside to see. And I was armed. I had a knife with me that I used to carry to cut brush with, not to hurt anything with. Anyway, I was perusing the hillside when I noticed a dark, tall figure standing in the brush, maybe 8 feet tall, something like that. But I couldn't quite make it out. And then I realized that this was a half man, half bull. This was a Minotaur. Now, I know that might sound strange and unusual to you. It was certainly shocking to me, an 8-foot black Minotaur that was very menacing. Immediately, he started insulting, calling me names, putting me down. And at first, I just couldn't get angry. I was so intimidated by two things. One, his majesty, and two, the size of the animal. But he kept after me. He kept after the ridicule. So I really lost it. I got really angry. And I picked up a stick and I started to chase him. It was a very, the limb of a tree. And I tried to chase him, but everywhere he would just go, he would just run. I couldn't catch him. He would run down the hill. I would run after him through the briars, and then I would get cut on my arms because I had a short sleeve shirt on, and my face got scratched by tree branches. I mean, but I kept after him, and the more I got scratched, the more I got hurt. I even fell and hurt my knee. The madder I got, and I just couldn't catch him. He was much too fast and much too agile to actually bring down. So I chased him up the hill and down the hill and over the hill and you name it. I climbed rocks to get to him, and every time I'd get close, he would be somewhere else. And then after, I don't know, maybe an hour of that, I was exhausted. And I turned a corner around this great stone, and there he stood, arms at his side. And I was so angry and upset, out of control, that I started to smash his face with the tree limb. I was trying to kill him. I tried everything I could to just tear him to pieces. I took my knife out and I stabbed him with it. He didn't resist. He could easily have torn me to pieces, but he didn't resist. He just stood there, and then he fell, and then I beat on him, and then I cut him up. And I cut pieces of him off, and I cut out his eyes, and I cut off his horns, and I disemboweled him, and I took a lot of him back to the cave, and I cooked him, and I ate them. I ingested part of the Minotaur that I had been chasing. And while I was eating him, I was ingesting his energy, which was really powerful. And all of a sudden, I felt really powerful myself, like somehow by eating the Minotaur, I was becoming the Minotaur, at least the power part of the Minotaur. And so I finished eating him, and I sort of passed out by the fire, and by the time I woke up, it was out. And there were pieces laying around that I hadn't eaten. And I was really, really exhausted. So I got in my truck, went down off the hill, and I got in my truck. I drove back to my study. And I called a friend of mine and told him what had happened. And he said, this is actually beyond my ability to comment on, so I think I should refer you to another. Now, the other was a shamanistic therapist who I didn't know, but he referred me to him, and to make things short, I kept his appointment, my friend's appointment, because I didn't have any money, so he had to pay for this. So I went to this friend of mine, and my friend of mine's therapist, and we'll just call him Ray for this interview, because I don't want to use his name. And I told him the story that I just told you, with some added details that I've left out, because I didn't want to, I don't want to tell everything that happened, but let me tell you that it was bloody. It was pretty gross. And he looked at me, he listened, he looked at me with such understanding. I thought he would be shocked and revolted by the story. And as a matter of fact, I was embarrassed to even tell him that this thing even happened, that I could see a Minotaur from Greek mythology and chase him around a mountain and beat him to death and cut him to pieces and eat most of him, at least the power parts, his genitals, you name it, I ate it. His tongue, his eyes, I ate him. And I felt sort of embarrassed, and I didn't know what else to say. So I said, well, that's kind of the story. And all he said to me was, what did you do with the power that the Minotaur gave you? And I said, what do you mean? What did I do? I went home. I wrote about it in my journal. I slept. I was tired. I felt kind of disgusted. I felt kind of shooken and shaken because I thought maybe I'd lost my mind, chasing around some ghost that didn't really exist. And he said, stop. Hear me. What did you do with the power that the Minotaur gave you? Obviously, he could have torn you to pieces, but he gave up his life. He gave up his very body to you as a gift. Well, I hadn't thought about it that way, but I thought, yeah, that's true. He said, so what did you do with the energy that he gave you? And I said, well, nothing. And he said, that's really unfortunate. Here, this magnificent mythological creature gives up its life for you, and you just throw away his energy like it didn't mean anything. I went home. I wrote about it in my journal. I meditated. I felt its energy, its power. I think I found that I began to understand what the Minotaur had done and what he had given me on that day on the mountain. The day of fire, the day of mass destruction, and a day of gifts. Gifts to the soul that could only come from a mythological creature like the Minotaur. Till next time, blessings and good night.